Everybody's ready to go? Okay, let's start this meeting then. We'll call this adjourned meeting of the City Council. All members except Councilmember Lopez is present. And we'll have the workshop, which is the master fee schedule presentation. And who wants to lead it off? You guys want to come up? You can come up to the podium, and I think you have a presentation. Not sure if Mikey's online or not.
Online and
Mikey, you there?
Hey, John. Hey, Mayor Dutray, can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So for tonight's presentation, we will be having Eric Johnson. He's the president of Revenue Cost Services
All right.
to be providing the PowerPoint presentation, as well as Richard Wall from Special Legal Counsel from Best and Krieger to help answer any other questions after the presentation. So Eric, if you'd like to go ahead and start, please do.
all right, great. Thank you, Mikey.
Thank you very much for being here. It's all yours.
Great, thank you. Well, good afternoon, Mayor, members of the council. I am Eric Johnson from Revenue and Cost Specialist. So it's good to be here with you this afternoon, this evening, to present the cost of services study that we did for the city. So before we get into that, just briefly, a little bit about RCS, Revenue and Cost Specialist. We were actually founded in 1980 with the wake of Proposition 13 and Proposition 4. The founders realized the cities would need to know what their services cost. So since then, we've studied over 250 agencies in 5 different states. I myself have been doing this since 1990, and I've worked with almost 150 agencies in 5 states also. So this is what we do, these cost of services studies. So first off, what is a cost study? So we've really recast the city budget with a business orientation. We did this because the voters told us to. In 1978, they passed Proposition 13, which limited property taxes, as we all know. Then a year later, they passed Proposition 4, which said that fees that do not exceed the cost reasonably borne of providing the service are not considered taxes. They wanted government to act more like a business and know its cost. But while governmental accounting does a great job of identifying where the cost funds, departments, and divisions, it was never designed to identify the cost of services. So we had to create that information. So working with city staff, we identify what it costs to provide the full business cost of services to your customers, to the public. So there's no city council service, there's no city manager service. It's like when you go to the grocery store and you buy a can of corn. You know when you buy that can of corn that it includes the cost of the farmer and the distributor and the trucker and the people at the grocery store and the checker there in front of you. You know that. We've done that same kind of thing here. So the city council, city manager overhead costs are part of the cost of providing that service. So when we take a look at what are these costs that we're saying that you're providing to your customers, these are the full business costs, including all these various overhead costs. So this is a comprehensive study. We've looked at user fees. We've looked at rents and use permits related to facility and ball field rentals. We've looked at fines related to parking fines. We are not looking at impact fees, in lieu fees, utility rates, any form of grants, or any form of taxes, just these above services. So of course, there are many good reasons to review these user fees. You want to update your current fees to be able to reflect what you're currently doing today. And we also looked at adding, removing, and redefining fees to, again, reflect what you're doing today. Want to make sure they're legally defensible. They do not exceed the cost reasonably borne of providing the service. In some cases, we look at the revenue collection when we're taking a look at how is this fee currently performing. And there's many fees here that are more market-oriented, especially your human services fees that we'll talk about a little later. As I mentioned, we're doing all this because the voters told us to. In 1979, they passed Proposition 4, as I mentioned, defined service fees as being limited to the full cost providing the service. Rents and fines are exempt from cost recovery limitations. In 1996, they passed Proposition 218, which placed limits on the creation and updates of certain property-related fees. And then in 2010, they passed Proposition 26, which codified a lot of existing kind of fee-setting practices as Article 13C of the state constitution. But it also said that fees must be for a service directly benefiting the fee payer. So how do we go about doing this? Well, our first step was to sit down with staff in all the various different departments and identify what are the services that you're currently providing. talk about services I've seen in other places that maybe you want to add here. And we went through that list a couple of times to make sure that this is what we want to take a look at. These are the services that we're providing in each department. We then sat down with the departments again, and in many cases, many meetings, who's spending time on these services? How much time is being spent? How many of these are you doing? In some cases, in the planning area, we broke it out into steps because there are many different steps in a planning application. So we broke out all the various different steps, identified time to it, and then we also looked at how many of these you're doing so we could look at what does all that time add up to? Have we made sure that we're not allocating time that doesn't exist? Everyone only has so many hours they can work a year, and so we reviewed that with that lens also, so not just how much time for one, but what's that total time? So we added up and allocated 100% of the time for all positions, doing something. Some of the time on fee services, some of the time on what we call tax-supported services that we'll talk about in a moment, some of the time on cost allocation plan services, administrative services, providing support to the other parts of the organization. We then developed a fully allocated hourly rate for every position. So we looked at the actual salaries for each position. We looked at the actual benefits for each position. We looked at the adopted budget for the non-personnel expenses, things like office supplies and contract services. Then we also looked at the overhead, citywide overhead, where we did a cost allocation plan where we allocated the cost of city council and city manager and finance and city clerk and human resources and facility maintenance and fleet maintenance, all those things that people need to be able to do their jobs. We also looked at departmental overhead, in some cases divisional overhead, for the administrative support provided within a department. So we added all that up together and we developed a fully allocated hourly rate for every position, a billing rate, a business rate for every position. We then matched that up with a time detail, and now we know what it costs to provide that service. So then we went back to the departments and said, here's the cost of the service, here's the current fee, and then here are some proposed fees. And then we went through that with the departments, again, a few times in many of the departments, to make sure that, A, the information still looked good, but also that the fees that we're recommending here today are fees that if you were to adopt, they could use and go into place. It's something that would work at the counter if you chose to adopt them. So I mentioned tax services and fee services. Tax services, or what we call community-supported services, typically benefits the community as a whole. They're 100% supported by tax dollars, things like police and fire and streets and parks. Those things when people say, what do my taxes pay for? This is what their taxes pay for. We also identified personal choice services, fee services. The customer is identifiable, the service is measurable. Most importantly, it benefits an individual or a group and not the larger community. You can still choose to subsidize it for whatever reason you as a council feel is appropriate. Planning fees, development fees, building fees, engineering fees are good examples of these types of user fees, personal choice services. So when we looked at this for Montclair, we came up with this subsidy here, but the difference between personal choice and community supported, I'm kind of a picture person, so when I look at this, it makes a lot more sense to me. If we look at the yellow circle in the upper right, those are taxes. Taxes are there to support community-supported services. In the upper left, we have fees and charges, and they're designed to support personal choice services. But to the extent that the fee doesn't cover the cost of providing the service, that money has to come from somewhere. The services are being provided, the costs are occurring, so the only other place it can come from is tax dollars. So we identified about a $7.9 million subsidy of fees that we've identified as personal choice services. Now that's a big number, so let's dive into that a little bit. Because you see at the bottom of that chart, the third column of numbers over, we see the total subsidy, $7.9 million. So we have community development being subsidized about $640,000, public safety, police and fire and code enforcement subsidized about $4.1 million, human services about $3.1 million, and administrative services about $60,000. Now, if we look at the column on the far right, that's what we think with the fee recommendations that are in this report, if you were to adopt, is the revenue you would receive on an annual basis. It's a much smaller number, $736,000. And the reason for the difference, let's kind of walk through the reason for those differences. Community development services, largely 100% cost recovery. But there is one service in their general plan maintenance surcharge where we recommended a subsidy, that the development community pay for half of it and the taxpayer pay for the other half of it. So that's about $100,000 difference in what we anticipate being the full cost. So that's why there's a difference there on community development services. Public safety services, there are fee services in here which are not really designed to recover the full cost. Some of them are designed to get people's attention, code enforcement services, code enforcement inspections, police false alarm response. Others are the EMS response. There are EMS fees that you currently have, and we're making you recommendations to change, but they're never designed to recover the cost of the program of a very large program like emergency response, emergency medical response. So there's still going to be a large subsidy there because this is one of those market-based fees. You can't charge, $5,000 for a response. It just won't work. We've also included engine company business inspections as a no-fee service in here also. Human services, as we all know, are very market-based fees. They're a mix of providing services to the community as well as being services that you charge a fee for. So there are some recommendations in here for some modest changes and to better reflect what the department's doing today, but it's not designed to recover its cost. It's going to be subsidized because otherwise, again, you can't charge $500 for a class. No one will come. And so we wanted to be conservative here, even though we recommended some modest changes. We just put zero new revenue and let that roll out to how it's going to roll out. And the administrative services are largely recovering their cost also. We are also recommending future increases for inflation be included in the resolution so that the city adopt a policy to increase fees annually for inflation based on the CPI so that on an annual basis you can have a 2, 3, 4% increase so that you don't get in a position where 5 years from now or 10 years from now you have to make large increases to your fees. You've kind of kept up with it modestly to keep up with your cost. Now the report itself, 501 pages, is a lot of information. And so let me just kind of walk you through how to read the report and get the information out of it that you want. The first 35 pages or so are explanatory text, going over a lot of what I just said here in more detail with some more background schedules also. Importantly, in Chapter 4, there's when we first start seeing the S numbers, service numbers, what we identified, your list of the services you're providing to the public that you could either are or could be charging a fee for. So on each of those summary schedules broken out by development services, public safety, human services, and administration, you'll see the S number, the service title, what the total fee revenue is on an annual basis for that service, the total service cost on an annual basis, and therefore either the profit or the subsidy. Because some services we are actually recommending that the fee go down because we're showing that the costs are less than the current fee. And then the possible new revenue off to the right. Now remember that S number, because when we get to Appendix A after the text, there's that S number again. And there on Appendix A, you can see in one place the current fee and the proposed fee side by side. So you can kind of see how the fees are changing on an individual service basis. And if you're going, why is this fee going up so much? You turn to Appendix B. And Appendix B for every one of these S numbers has this detail, 2 matching pages. On the left-hand side will be a description of the service. Below that, what the current fee is. Below that, what the current fee is recovering in revenue and what it costs on a total basis and a per unit basis. That cost detail comes from the right-hand page. And so you can see all the positions involved in providing that service, how much time they're spending on each one of these, what that turns into on a fully allocated hourly rate basis, how many of these the city's doing every year, and then the total cost. And then over in the lower left-hand corner will be that proposed fee to, in most cases, recover 100% of the cost. So you can see all that detail from all the meetings that we had with staff to identify who's spending time, how much time are they spending, how many of these we're doing. There are some appendices in the back because some of them just have more detail. Building and safety fees, you'll see the details on the building and safety fees. We went into a lot of detail with the department to break out how much time is actually being spent on all the various different services, whether it be new construction, which is square footage based, where some are going up, some are going down. Buildings, and then the trade permits, mechanical, electrical, plumbing permits are in a separate schedule in Appendix C, so you can see the time involved there. And in most cases, a lot of these fees are actually going down when we looked at the time spent and the updated cost. So you can see all of that detail there. Appendix D has the fire prevention fees, which are really a pass-through from your fire prevention consultant. So wanted to keep up to date so that it's the city's not having to subsidize because the consultant is charging more than you guys are charging the applicant. Parking enforcement fines, those are, we did a survey of the surrounding area to see what other cities are charging for similar fines and found that the city is pretty much in line with surrounding cities, so we did not recommend any changes to the parking enforcement fines. Human services fees, as I mentioned, we had some recommendations in here to make changes to the human services fee schedule. So anywhere from the program fees to the facility and field rental fees. There are not large changes in the dollar amounts, but there's a lot of structural changes. The existing fee schedule just didn't reflect what the department was currently doing. So you'll see a lot of services where just remove this fee, and in some cases we broke out in different detail. So all of that is in this 501 pages to provide this information to help you make a decision. Because our goal really is to identify the full cost for all the various services that the city is providing. We have made fee recommendations for every service that we think you can either are charging a fee for and stay within your cost, or could charge a fee for and still, of course, stay within your cost. But of course, it's up to the city council to decide which services should be charged the full cost and which services are subsidized with tax dollars. Because again, the services are being provided, the costs are occurring. The question now is who's going to pay for it? Taxpayer or the person or group receiving the service. So that concludes the presentation. So certainly available for questions.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I'm going to ask my council colleagues if they have any questions. I have no speaker currently on the queue. Anybody? No? Nobody? Nobody? Okay, well, I will just say that I think you guys done a pretty good job in calculating or updating the fees for the city. And I don't have an issue with it. I think it's something that we haven't done this in several years, and it's good that we update our fees, but at least we also, when we update the fees, we also justify how we're gonna go about it, making sure we're not technically making a profit, that we actually are covering fees for the costs that's been incurred. Councilmember Mendez, go ahead.
Yeah, I went through this 500-page report, which is very impressive. Yeah, and I understand, the cost of services and, trying to charge fees and, just going through them all. I mean, I know that human services is a very important program with youth and senior programs and after-school programs, but it just seems like that's a lot that we're not recouping, and I just feel like maybe there can be some other way to, and I know you give suggestions in there, and I know it says, zero, no, we're not gonna do anything, but I think it's just something maybe we can look at even closer, just because I feel like there's a lot of room there, and, right now, budgets are tight, and, we're trying to figure everything out, and, sometimes cuts need to be made just to survive, but like I said, I'll talk with my colleagues about that, but everything, it's a great report. I like what you guys did and put it together, and like I said, I went through it, and it's very explanatory too, so appreciate that you make it user-friendly.
Good.
So, but that's just my comments right now.
Well, thank you. Can you discuss that a little bit about human services? I know the total fee revenue was projected to be, well, Total service cost is 5 million, total revenue, fee revenue estimate is 1.9, with a being under 3.1. I assume there's a good justification for that, or Marcia, you want to tie in on this one? Whoever wants to take the lead.
I don't know that you mentioned about grants that we receive. So, for example, the after-school program, we receive over $1 million in grant funding,
So that's part of this $5 million service cost? Okay, all right.
and
So
we
there's $1
don't
million.
charge for the after-school program.
Right.
So, those are things to
So there's
to
really
kind
$1
of
million,
look at.
so it's really $2.9 million if you throw the grant into it. Okay. All right. Anything else on that question? Anybody else? Councilman Rue.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Very good report, well done. I too had a question or comment on human services. And I understand where we're going with some of this, and I appreciate where we can keep the costs low. Many of our families have felt the economic impact of this economy. Gas is over $6 a gallon. In many cases, their food bills have gone up quite a bit. They're struggling. They may not have necessarily had a raise, and in some cases, these families just can't afford it. And these programs are lifelines for them. And so as much as we can, if we can try to keep the costs low, I appreciate getting grants. I know we were in Washington, D.C. We talked with Congressmember Torres and Congressmember Cisneros, as well as a number of different departments, about funding we might be able to get for some of these programs. And I think we're going to have to continue to pursue that, because for a lot of our families and our seniors, these programs are all they really have. And so whatever we can do to continue to keep the costs low, it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Yes. Did any of your analysis or studies, did you take into account the income levels of our residents? Did you look at those demographics?
No, we just look at here are the costs. We did break out a resident versus non-resident, but it was working with staff because obviously staff knows the community a lot better than I do, and trying to set fees at a level that most people will be able to afford, and because you don't want to get to a point where you're pricing yourself out of the market, of course. I've seen other agencies where they'll do scholarships for residents that may not be able to afford the fees that are in place, is one option, but that ultimately is up to the council to decide of what level you want to set the fees at.
Well, the last time figures were released on our demographics with respect to income, I believe it was at $60,000 for a family of 4, which is not a lot given today's economic expenses that are required of a family. And I know that there are presently, we don't have mass residents showing up to meetings or even community events saying, I can't afford your fees, or whenever they're asked to pay, they're too high, because we've kept them down and they've been very affordable. So I at this time, and especially after what my colleague just said, I would have to back him up and agree with him as to the current state of the economic situation, where they are paying more for gas, for food, healthcare expenses are high. And I know those are external issues that don't come to us directly, but nonetheless, our residents are still feeling the pinch. Now, I think folks might even say, well, the bulk of these fees, like development fees, are paid by developers or those that have property and can afford it. And that might be true to a certain extent, but even then, you can't squeeze blood out of a turnip, and you can't keep going to the well all the time. There's a cap and a limit to that, where even right now, some developers may be holding back because of interest rates and whatnot. Qualifying for loans with banks to invest in their properties might be a little bit too high for them right now. So there is this angst, if you will, or some are just keeping their cards to their vest, close to their vest, and withholding from doing anything. I just don't think this is an appropriate time to do this. I know we maybe haven't done it in a while, but I think our budgets are absorbing whatever outstanding expenses that we are having to face and endure. And I think the present situation is working, and I would hope that we would have some other revenue streams coming in, perhaps marijuana that we're going to look at in a month or two, that we might have some additional income where this probably isn't going to be so much of a factor. But anyhow, if you have any more comments, I would welcome to hear them.
No, ultimately, this does come down to the will of the council as to, like I said, these are market-based fees. We set them at a level that we felt, working with departmental staff, was appropriate for the market, but not obviously everybody. And so it's up to you as a council to decide where we want to set these fees. And again, costs are occurring, services are being subsidized, they're going to continue to be subsidized no matter what. It's just a question of what level do you want to subsidize it, because these are services that are important to the community.
It's not just our residents that sometimes have to pay fees. I understand it's business owners, folks that don't live in the city, but nonetheless, they invest in the city because of their business, and that's predominantly the main source where I can see folks having to pay for fees, changes, permitting, you name it, habitually or continually more so than a resident. Because I believe you stated, you phrased it very well, and I wanted to quote you on it. The fees are identifiable, they're measurable, the benefits benefit an individual or group, and they are like a development permit or inspection, and that's very much an accurate description. But that said, I just know, folks that are even having to do or wanting to do ADUs presently, and they're having to pay a high number of fees, and they're even paying fees to the school district that is in the thousands. And that's even out of our hands, but it's something that is asked of them from a separate entity. So we're asking them to pay for inspections and permitting, and yet they're having to also pay another entity for requirements for school fees and whatnot. So I've always just been a little bit leery of this stuff whenever it comes up. But thanks for your time. And if you didn't look at the income of our residents, staff should have, and I'm disappointed that they didn't.
Mr. Mayor, if I may respond.
Go ahead.
I think the point here is that the city is subsidizing fees by the tune of $8 million on an annual basis. And if we're only going to be recovering by making adjustments here, the tune of about $736,000, I think that the city is still making an annual massive subsidy on fees that are basically personal choice services. And so if you're not going to make an adjustment in relation to the fee schedule that is being recommended here this evening, you have to realize that in an effort to try and protect low-income households from not paying a personal choice service fee, you're making them pay and subsidize for any other household or a developer that, for example, wants to do a project. So either way, if you're going to adjust the fees slightly and it does impact households that are of low income that have made a decision that they want to get involved in something that is a personal choice, that seems to me to be a fair proposition, as opposed to making those individuals subsidize everyone else in the community, even those who are higher income as well as developers, in order to preserve and protect a lower cost fee for them. So as the council goes forward and wants to weigh this issue, I think this is an important decision for you to make, but also keep in mind that I think the discussion in the report points out revenues coming into cities are strained as it is now, particularly with what is going on across the nation right now in relation to the impact on local revenue sources. And as we continue to struggle with trying to produce a balanced budget, for your consideration, the fees that you're asking the fees you're asked to consider, not tonight, but at another time when this comes back to you, are part of the effort to try and recover from what is happening. And one of the big issues that the council is struggling with is in relation to sales tax revenue, and how other larger cities that have brought in Amazon and other fulfillment centers into their communities have entered into tax sharing agreements with them, and in turn have changed the point of sale to that particular community. Those taxes for everything that is purchased online is going to those cities. It's not going to the cities of Montclair or the 430 other cities in the state of California that do not have fulfillment centers. So we're losing tax revenues from that perspective as well. So this is one effort to try and recover, and I ask that the council be open-minded when we do bring it forward for your consideration.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem Martinez.
Hi. No questions. I just wanted to thank you for your time and your presentation and the thoroughness of your report. It was very well written and well thought out.
Great, thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I think the biggest cost in the city of Montclair, which is many cities, is public safety, which very few of that cost is recovered. Kind of wish, somebody committed a crime, send them a bill, and then, covers our cost for that. It's not the way it works. But, I understand that, we are dealing with tightening propositions right now as far as the economy is concerned. I realize budgets here in Montclair, family budgets are also getting tighter. I think when Councilmember Mendez brought up human services, we're talking about $5 million in costs, but we're doing a 38.4% recovery based on this proposal. And then we go to community development services, which is really greatly based on those costs and revenues are really based on the development community who come to the counter, want to build something, want to have a use or have other service demands. We're looking at a 65.7% recovery here, or 642,000, which I think is reasonable for those services for here in Montclair. And that's pretty typical with a lot of other cities too. This is kind of usually community development, the building department, the planning division, public works division, again, deal with a lot of the developers. That's where those costs are usually a high percentage of that is recuperated by the cities for those costs, the service provider of those costs. So at this time, I will move that we just direct staff to put this on a future city council meeting. Can I get a second to that motion?
I will second that.
Got a second to the motion. Any objections to the motion? If there's no objections to the motion, that's so ordered. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
This is the opportunity for members of the public to address the council. I don't think any members of the public want to talk to us right now, so we're adjourned. Thank you.